The Buccaneers choke one away in Atlanta. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this live post-game reaction episode of the Locked On Bucs podcast, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs, credential member of the media, covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers as editor-in-chief of the 813.tv, here with you every Monday through Friday, along with the everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes to become an insider today. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Almost hit the biggest parlay of my life on FanDuel from this game. I needed 19 receiving yards from Rachaad White and I would have hit. Didn't happen. But my biggest takeaways and handing out some write-ups coming up in a little bit. Let's get started with the biggest moment. And I thought towards the end of the game that I was going to be talking about Tavierre Thomas blocking a Younghoe Koo field goal in this moment. Instead, it's going to be the most inopportune turnover that we have ever seen. So Bucky Irving on 1st and 10 from the Atlanta 32 gets through the defense inside the 25-yard line, and the ball gets punched out by Jesse Bates, and the Falcons take over with just under 3 minutes remaining. And I know what you're saying. You're probably going to say in the chat right now, James, Lavonte David got an interception shortly after. Yes, that's 100% true. But the Bucs run game on that drive was clicking. Rachaad gains 8. Baker gains 5 and a first down. Bucky gets 6. Rachaad gets a tough 3 yards and another first down. The Bucs were already in field goal range, and they were looking like they were going to get into the end zone and put this game away. That fumble changed the entire landscape of the momentum and the script for the rest of the night, and it completely took away the offense's ability to put the game away. In fairness, Lavonte's interception had the Bucs in field goal range, but then a holding call on Graham Barton, followed by a pass to Rachaad for a loss of 2 yards, then conceding and just running the ball on 3rd and 25 from the Atlanta 43. That only gained a yard, and they weren't in field goal range. They opt to try to pin the Falcons deep. The punt goes into the end zone. It's a touchback, and the rest is history. My biggest problem with that series, though, was the blatantly missed face mask on the same play as Barton's hold. Don't get me wrong. It was definitely a hold by Graham Barton, and I am in no way blaming officiating for the Bucs losing this one. But a face mask there on that play is an offsetting penalty, and they're going to replay 2nd and 13 from the 31. Even if they don't gain another yard, McLaughlin is going to make that field goal, and now the Falcons have to score a touchdown instead of kicking a field goal to send this one into overtime. Maybe they do score a touchdown. With the way the defense played, they probably do score a touchdown. So that's why it was bigger to me that Bucky fumbled on the previous drive, because that Falcons defense looked like a deer in headlights, and they were just giving up yards on the ground while that clock continued to move. The Bucs had plenty of opportunities to ice this one. On the screen to Rachaad that went for a 2-yard loss, Evans was as open as he has probably ever been in his Hall of Fame career. He would have had a walk-in touchdown. That would have ended the game. The offense left plays on the field, but the defense was the problem in this one. I'm going to talk more about them in a little bit. But this is one of those losses where you look back and you're thinking about missed opportunities. The Bucs were one play away from 4-1. Instead, they're 3-2. They're 0-1 in the division, and they have dropped to second in the NFC South behind the Atlanta Falcons. They have the Saints next week. Then they get the Ravens in prime time. Then they get the Falcons again. I said it earlier this week that the Bucs have to go 2-1 in these 3 divisional games. Now they absolutely have to win next week and when they host Atlanta 2 weeks after that. This was a huge game for the Bucs that they just could not put away and really couldn't afford to give away. They gave Atlanta chance after chance after chance. And if you give a division rival that many opportunities on their own home field, it's going to bite you in the butt at some point. And that's exactly what happened in this one. It was a gut punch for Buccaneers fans. When that Lavonte David interception happened, I tweeted out, or not tweeted out, but I texted out to the insiders. I said, who else but Lavonte David? This one will all but seal this game. There was still time on the clock. Atlanta still had their timeouts. So at that point, it was not over. And sure enough, snatching defeat from the jaws of victory, the Buccaneers found a way to just completely implode and give this one to the Atlanta Falcons. And this could be a galvanizing moment for an Atlanta team that has struggled this year. They still have not had a game decided by more than one possession this season, but this is back-to-back wins now for the Atlanta Falcons against division opponents. So now everyone is chasing Atlanta. They have to lose games within the division to allow the Bucs to start to catch up. It's going to be a big matchup in a couple of weeks when the Bucs can get that split with the Falcons. That is going to be pivotal, but it starts with the Saints game next week. If the Bucs lose to the Saints next week, it's going to be a very, very difficult road back to the top of the NFC South, because that puts you at 500 on the season and 0-2 in the division. That means you have to run the table the rest of the way in that division in order to get yourself back to the top. This division's a lot tougher than what people want to give it credit for because of the last couple of years and how average at best it has been. But this game in prime time on the road was a huge one that the Bucs just gave away. Gonna jump into the chat real quick. Ben says, what was with Cohen's play calling at the end? It looked like Canales, total choke job. I'm not going to go that far. I think once they got the holding penalty against Barton, it kind of forced Cohen's hand to try to do some other things. I didn't hate the screen pass to Rashad on the previous drive. The Bucs had picked up a solid chunk of yards on a very similar play. So I didn't hate that call. The blocking was bad on the screen pass. And so it goes from what should have been probably a 5 or 6 yard pickup to a loss of 2. If you pick up 4, 5, 6 yards on that play, you're in McLaughlin's field goal range. You're kicking it. And again, you're forcing the Falcons to have to get into the end zone rather than kicking a game-tying field goal at the end of regulation. We got Justin in the chat that says terrible pass coverage. Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. I'll talk plenty about the pass coverage a little bit. Demon Hunter says, I'm a little late, but I'm here. By the way, what about that blatant face mask? Demon Hunter, you are a little bit late because I just talked about the face mask. And again, I'll reiterate, that's an offsetting penalty. The Bucs are at 2nd and 13, getting a redo. Even if they don't gain a yard, they're kicking a field goal. But, instead, they don't call it. And maybe they kick the field goal. Maybe they have to force Atlanta to score a touchdown. With the way the defense played, Atlanta probably doesn't have a problem scoring a touchdown on the following drive. So a lot of problems for the Buccaneers in this one, but I'm going to give my biggest takeaways on both sides of the ball. That is next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports because unlike other apps, on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. It's the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy so that your lineups stay in play even if one of your players leaves in the first half and doesn't return. Prize Picks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. It's super simple to play. You just pick more or less than a player's stat projections and then watch all of your winnings roll in. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNFL, all one word, on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed when you play $5. Prize Picks, run your game. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. The new Locked On NFL is here. Locked On NFL is now 2 shows every day. First, the madman Tyler Rowland kicks off your morning with a double shot of NFL espresso. Then stop by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. You add in Locked On local experts, and you get unprecedented NFL insight, hot opinions, detailed breakdowns, all in 30 minutes. It's the new Locked On NFL, and you should make it your second listen at the new Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. My biggest takeaways for this one on offense: Baker is that dude. I have held off from going too overboard about Baker Mayfield through the early part of this season, but he has just been outstanding. Only 19 for 24 for 180 yards, but had 3 touchdowns once again, 42 yards rushing, so a total of 222 yards from Baker. He picked up key first downs with his legs, even after injuring his knee in the first half. He is now tied for the most passing touchdowns in the NFL with Sam Darnold, who obviously has yet to play this week. But Mayfield has been sharp. He's been accurate. He's been level. Baker Mayfield is doing some incredible things this season, and hopefully that continues. The Bucs need him at the top of his game next week so that they do not lose those 2 divisional matchups in a row, because that's the kind of thing that has you battling for a wild card spot instead of the division crown. He has to continue to be that reliable player that he's been this season and get this offense going against New Orleans. Baker talked about it leading up to the game. The Bucs were 3-1 last year, and then in the blink of an eye, they were 4-7, fighting for their lives. 1 loss can turn into 2, then 3, then 6 out of 7. Not this year, not with the Falcons in first place and the Saints looking to knock Tampa back to 3rd. You cannot lose next week. This has become now a must win coming off of the mini bye. So Baker has to really take the bull by the horns and be the player that really just wills them to a victory. He's a lot closer to being the kind of quarterback that can compete for a Super Bowl than people want to give him credit for, but he is definitely in that conversation with the level of play that we've seen out of him through the first 5 weeks. My biggest takeaway on the defensive side of the ball, that was pathetic. And I don't know what other way to say it. I don't know how to be nicer about it. I know they're hurt. I know that they're banged up. I know that they lost more players to injury during the game, but that was absolutely pathetic. Kirk Cousins finished with 509 yards and 4 touchdowns. The Bucs sacked him 4 times and it didn't matter because they couldn't get off the field on 3rd and long or on 4th down. I was actually shocked when I saw that the Falcons were only 6 of 14 on 3rd down, because I could not for the life of me remember a single time that the Bucs actually made a splash on 3rd down to get off the field. Maybe it was because they were all coming in field goal range, or that Atlanta would turn around and convert on 4th down, but that was an absolutely god-awful performance. KJ Britt was absolutely bullied by Kirk Cousins. The middle of the field was open all night, and a lot of it was Cousins just baiting Britt and then firing down the field to these wide open spaces. 2 Falcons receivers go for over 100 yards each and combined for 3 touchdowns. And honestly, it should have been 3 by Darnell Mooney alone if it wasn't for that just gift of a drop that he had that then led to the blocked field goal by Tavier Thomas. But there was just no stopping Kirk Cousins in this game. A career high in attempts, a career high in yards. I don't think this was the Kirk-tober that Aaron mentioned on the crossover yesterday so much as just an abysmal game and an abysmal game plan by Todd Bowles. Soft zone, 15-yard cushions all night, no changes. And Kirk Cousins just picked them apart. There was no pressure. Yeah, there were 4 sacks, but the key was to get consistent pressure on Cousins. 20% or more on his dropbacks is the number that they needed to hit, and the Bucs didn't even come close. He had all day to pick apart that secondary, and he did it to absolute perfection. As soon as it went to overtime, I knew the Bucs were cooked. I knew they were done. Then they lose the coin toss, and I texted my buddy and said, that's it. Falcons just won the game. And he texts me back and he goes, you're being a little dramatic. You know, the defense can get a stop. The Bucs just have to kick a field goal. I said, no, this defense has been terrible all night. They are exhausted. They are missing some of their biggest playmakers. The secondary cannot stop Cousins. The Bucs just lost the game. Bowles' entire approach in this one was bad. And you would have thought that things would have gotten a little bit of a shakeup after the way the first half went. No, it stayed exactly the same. This team misses Antoine Winfield Jr. They miss Kalijah Cansey. And yes, things got worse when Whitehead went out with a groin injury. And I don't expect the Bucs to look that bad defensively when Atlanta comes to Ray J, but they shouldn't have looked that bad tonight. This game was one that the Bucs should have won, and instead they got torched. So for those of you keeping count at home, that is 2 very winnable games that the Buccaneers have lost this season, and the defense has just not been to the level that it needs to be. Not like it was against Detroit, not like last week against Philadelphia, not even like it was against Washington, who looks like a powerhouse, and Jaden Daniels should be the runaway rookie of the year through the first 4 weeks of the season. It was a clinic on what not to do defensively if you're facing the Atlanta Falcons or probably any semi-competent NFL team, because you'll get roasted. And that's exactly what the Bucs showed. Justin in the chat says, bring back Shaq. I don't think Shaq helps. Honestly, Shaq didn't really do anything last year, and he's been out of football. I don't think bringing Shaq Barrett onto this team will help the pass rush in any way, shape, or form. BT in the chat says, Britt and Dean hurting this team with bad play. Demon Hunter says, KJ is 45 in coverage all over again. Just a better thumper. I do see Justin saying the creamsicle game is coming up. Indeed it is. Hopefully they actually win it. If they lose the creamsicle game, that means they're 0-2 against the Falcons. You can't have that. You go 0-2 against the Falcons, you're not winning the division. And that's really what it's going to boil down to. I have my biggest complaints, and I'm handing out some write-ups. That's a first here on the Locked On Bucs podcast. NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You're going to get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. You can hit up some same-game parlays, anytime touchdown scorers, player props, so much more. I had a huge parlay in the Bucs-Falcons game. I was this close. I was this close to hitting it. Your boy even had the Sterling Shepard anytime touchdown, and I still didn't hit because bad things happen to good people. But also, with the MLB playoffs in full swing, you can take a shot at who you think is going to win the World Series. Get started this week with your $200 in bonus bets just for placing a $5 bet, all at FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com. Wrapping things up here on a live post-game reaction episode of the Locked On Bucs podcast. And instead of game balls, I'm handing out write-ups. Now, many of you in the working world know what a write-up is. For those that don't, it's a written notice by your employer or your boss to let you know that you have a problem, and if it isn't fixed, they now have a paper trail to fire you and deny you unemployment. So it's time to start handing some of them out. First and foremost, Jamel Dean. Yikes. He has been terrible this season. He got shook out of his cleats on multiple occasions by Darnell Mooney. Couldn't get a pass breakup to save his life, except for the one that he did get in this game that was a great play, but it also resulted in a flag against KJ Britt. So I'm not going to count it. That play still resulted in a first down, and the Falcons would go on to score on the drive. Bucs fans were having a big laugh at the expense of Carlton Davis on Monday Night Football, getting 3, not 1, not 2, 3 defensive pass interference calls, but I'm not sure that there's a single Bucs fan out there that wouldn't trade Jamel Dean for Carlton Davis right now. I like Jamel Dean. You guys know that I was relatively optimistic about a Jamel Dean bounce back season for him, but through 5 weeks, it's just not there. I do think that I was talking to David Harrison. You guys remember David. I was talking to him about Tyke Smith and how I think Tyke Smith shows some of the building blocks and some of the promise to be on a Zion McCollum trajectory. That, even though he's struggling a little bit now, you see the pieces there. And it's about putting it all together. And that by year 3, just like Zion McCollum, he's going to be a top-end starter on this defense. Jamel Dean, as of right now, I don't think he's even going to be on the roster next year, let alone in 2026 when Tyke Smith should be hitting that stride. The challenges do not get any easier next week, so Dean better wake up and man up in a real big hurry. My next write-up is going to KJ Britt. We all thought Devin White was a liability in coverage. Holy moly. KJ Britt makes Devin White look like prime Darrelle Revis. The longer this goes on, the more other teams are going to absolutely hyper target KJ Britt in coverage, and they're going to continue to shred him. Britt was probably on the verge of losing his starting job to Servassier Dennis before Dennis suffered that shoulder injury. He's good in run defense. He's a leader in the locker room. He's a vocal guy. But at some point, that's not enough anymore. And if Servassier Dennis was healthy, I think this is the kind of game that would be the straw that broke the camel's back. Britt can be better, and it's going to take more time and more experience for him to reach his full potential. But the Bucs cannot afford to lose games waiting for that to happen. KJ Britt has got to step up. and that pass coverage has to be leaps and bounds better. You're getting ready to go up against a New Orleans Saints team that can attack you with the tight end position. They can attack you with running backs out of the backfield. They can attack you across the middle. They have a deep threat in Rashid Shaheed. KJ Britt is going to get picked on again if he doesn't start to buckle down and clamp down on some of these receiving targets for other teams. And then my final write-up might be a little bit of a surprise to some of you, but my final write-up is going to go to Joe Tryon-Shoyinka. Dude, where are you? His season started off so well in those first two games. I was talking about him on this show. Evan was talking about him on this show. There were people writing about him. What a start to the season by Joe Tryon-Shoyinka. And since then, it's been a giant nothing burger. I thought after those first two games that he was on a mission to send a message and show the world that he's the guy the Bucs thought he could be when he was a first-round pick. Since then, straight up Houdini. Just an absolute disappearing act from this defense. The pass rush needs all the help that it can get, and hopefully Kancey is returning next week. Anthony Nelson has stepped up. Logan Hall looks fantastic the last couple of weeks, but there is no threat from the outside except for Yaya Diaby. So teams don't even worry about it. All the extra blockers, the blocking tight ends, the focus on the edges are wherever number 0 is, because Joe Tryon-Shoyinka can't win a one-on-one. Chris Braswell, he wins on occasion, but it's way, way too late. It's not fast enough for him to get into the backfield and actually pressure the quarterback. Come on. JTS, come on, bro. You've got to show something out there. Where's the guy that was on the field the first 2 weeks of the season? Because that guy was a difference maker. That guy was making headlines. He was making plays. Where'd that dude go? The Bucs need him back this week against the Ravens, against the Falcons. Then you get back-to-back weeks against the Super Bowl matchup from last year. Someone has to step up. You know, I even crapped on Yaya Diaby a little bit because he wasn't making plays. But you know what? It's really hard to make plays when you're getting schemed out of games because you're the only threat. Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, Chris Braswell. I thought maybe we would see some Jose Ramirez out there. He was finally active. Nothing. Marquise Watts, the only time we heard his name all night was when he got hurt. Someone step up for this team. Jamel, step up and make a play in coverage. Britt, step up and actually pretend that you know how to be in pass coverage. This defense against Atlanta was a joke, and they are getting ready to go up against some of the best offenses in the NFL. You think this defense is going to be able to stop Derrick Henry? You think this defense is going to be able to stop Olave and Shaheed? You think this defense is going to be able to stop Ayuk, Debo, Jordan Mason, and George Kittle? Wake up. This was a game that you had to win, and you had it in your hand, and you just threw it away. When the offense is putting up 30 points, they should win. There was no excuse for that. And those three guys that I just gave the first ever Locked On Bucs write-ups to are three of the main culprits for it. You had guys out there busting their tails. Levante busting his tail. Zion McCollum, another good game from him. Gray Gaines, Anthony Nelson, Vita Vea, Logan Hall. These guys were killing it. and they had no support. Guys like Britt, JTS, Dean, even Izzy in some spots, they killed that effort from those guys. You have 11 days, Tampa. You have 11 days to figure it out, fix it, and get ready for another divisional game that you cannot, under any circumstances, lose. I think the Bucs get Antoine Winfield Jr. back next week. I hope they get Luke Gedeke and Kalijah Cansey back next week. I hope that Jordan Whitehead's groin injury is not a serious one, and this mini bye is going to get him back on the field. But if Cansey's out, if Antoine's out, if Luke, if Jordan, if those guys are out, Todd, you got to figure it out, man. You're the defensive genius. You got to figure it out. You can only play with the cards you're dealt. And right now, the Bucs are being dealt injury after injury after injury. You have to overcome it, or you're going to be left in the dust. That's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Bucs. I actually have to go to work right now as soon as we're done. So I'm going to bid you all a fair adieu. Thank you all so much who came in through the live stream. You guys are the absolute best. Rick Dog, Lakita, Chet, Justin, Ben, Demon Hunter, Blake, you guys are awesome. Thank you for staying up late with me. Please check out everything going on over at the 813.tv. Follow on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at JYarcho_Bucs. Become a Locked On Bucs insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes. And make sure you follow on YouTube and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Hit that like button. I really appreciate it. If you're a podcast listener, you know what? A 5-star iTunes review really does help me out. It helps suggest the podcast to other potential Buccaneers fans, helps the show grow. If you guys would be so kind to leave a 5-star review on iTunes, I would greatly appreciate it. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding weekend. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. Thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs.